receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
My body, my choice. My body, my choice. I'm sure you've heard these words chanted by leftist protesters. My body, my choice. That's what they always say. Of course, that when it comes to abortion, of course, that unborn child doesn't have the choice to live. The child that they murder in the womb never had the right to life. But my body, my choice is what they say. Oh, except when it comes to vaccines. So it's your body, your choice until the child is born. So you can kill the child before it's born if you want. That's your body, your choice. But then when the child is born, it becomes the government's body, the government's choice, and they force you to vaccinate your kids. Now, I don't know why they care so much if you don't want to get vaccinated. After all, you're vaccinated, you should be fine. I'm the one at risk. Oh, because it's not about the vaccines. It's about control. It's about authoritarianism. And Del Bigtree has been one of the lead fighters when it comes to vaccine choice. Of course, you've probably seen or heard of his documentary, Vaxxed. So Del Bigtree joins me now from ICanDecide.com. My body, my choice, Del. That is until the baby's born. Then the government decides that it's their choice to vaccinate your child.
That's absolutely right. Oh, and thanks for having me on to talk about this. This is a really important issue. I mean, we're talking about, all of the fundamental rights we think we have to protect our land rights, our right to bear arms, but we're giving up our right to control what's injected into our bodies and the bodies of our children. And that's the main focus of what I'm involved in fighting for. I'm trying to wake people up to the fact that you're being force injected. More and more states are passing laws to force inject not only your children, but also they're working on adult mandates where they're going to line up every adult in America and inject them with vaccines. So if that's not a good idea or you're not into it, you need to stand up and start representing your thoughts at every state capital in this country, because pharma, which is now the most powerful lobby in Washington, they're outspending oil and gas 2 to 1. They're buying all of your next politicians as we speak. This next election is going to be under major scrutiny and control by the pharmaceutical industry. This great industry that's brought us the OxyContin epidemic, that is over and over again, every time you see that lawyer on your television screen saying, if you've been injured by this drug, they've paid out billions and billions of dollars for lying to the public. If you look at Vioxx, if people remember Vioxx, that killed over 60,000 people with heart attacks. And in their own studies, they knew it caused heart attacks. They hid that from the FDA. That's Merck that got busted with that. Merck makes most of our childhood vaccines. So I'm trying to get people to understand that vaccines are not made by some group of angels at these pharmaceutical, agencies that we detest. It's the same people, the same money-grubbing, controlling, power, group that are trying to buy politicians that are making your vaccines. Only difference between drugs and vaccines is they can't force drugs on you yet. They can force vaccines on you, and we need to stop that.
Well, and, when you talk about vaccinating or forced vaccination of adults, you look at a situation, let's say there's some big outbreak, right? Some big viral outbreak or something, and they say, oh, we have the vaccine. This is kind of what they tried to do with the, I think it was the swine flu. This is the mosquitoes were carrying, or Zika. It was Zika they were doing it with Ebola
Right.
and all of this stuff. And so, yeah, the general population, if they were, scared, they would go get the vaccine if they thought that that would stop them from getting this disease that's outbreaking. But there's another layer to this, and I kind of like to tie this in, at least this aspect, with the food industry, where if you take the average individual, right, and you say, hey, do you eat this or that food product? And they'll say, yeah, I eat that or drink that. And you say, okay, let me just read off the ingredients to this, right? Here's X, Y, and Z
Right.
ingredients. Multiple have been, linked to X, Y, and Z, whether they're carcinogenic, diabetes, this, that, or the other thing. Okay, now that you know the truth about these ingredients, do you still want to eat this food? Most of the time, they're going to kind of take a step back and say, wow, maybe I do need to reconsider my diet. Maybe I need to read the ingredients on this food before I eat it. But it's the same thing with vaccines. It's just a vaccine, just another needle. I'm the doctor, right? Trust me, I'm just going to stick you. It's a vaccine. Everybody gets it. Well, why don't you actually read the insert? Why don't you read the ingredients of that vaccine, make an informed decision, and then see what ingredients are in there, see what side effects they have, and then you can make the informed decision. Do you want those ingredients to be put into your child at a very young age where their blood-brain barrier hasn't been fully developed? It's a very dangerous thing, and you make an informed decision. And I think just like with food, most people are going to see that ingredient list and say, you know what? I don't think I want that.
You may be right. I mean, look, we do know that aluminum is proving to be a very, very toxic element in all of our vaccines, being given at huge doses. I was just at the Aluminum Adjuvant Convention in Portugal, where all the top scientists are investigating specifically the amount of aluminum we're injecting. So I got to interview Chris Exley, who did the biggest brain study of autistic children ever, and he found the highest levels of aluminum ever recorded in the human brain in all 5 of the brains, including a 15-year-old child. Now, to put that in perspective, he also is the one that did the study of 100 brains of children, of people who had Alzheimer's. All of those people were 50 to 80 years old, all 100 of those brains. And up until that study, that was the highest levels of aluminum ever seen. So now in the autism study, he's seeing a 15-year-old with more aluminum than the 50 and 80-year-old Alzheimer's patients. And what's really terrifying about it, when I interviewed him, he said that when it came to Alzheimer's, we were seeing aluminum around the outside of the cell. Somehow aluminum had sort of crossed that blood-brain barrier and gotten into the brain. It was surrounding the cells of the brain. He said, and I quote, I asked him, so you're saying aluminum can cause Alzheimer's? He says, no. I said, no aluminum, no Alzheimer's. That's how clear he is on the study that he did. But what he pointed out with autism is it's different. He said the aluminum we're finding in the autistic brains of these children is inside the cells. To be specific, inside the glia, which is the immune cells in your brain. So now we know that the immune activation that's happening in the shoulder, when we inject the vaccine in the shoulder, our immune cells are grabbing that and then making it into our brain and destroying the brains of children. This is being backed up, Owen, in so many different studies around the world. There's a great scientist in China named Yao who studied at the University of Pittsburgh. He's doing huge rat and mice studies looking at the hepatitis B vaccine that we give to day 1 old babies. And in every mouse model and study, he is showing neurological development disorders after vaccinating the same way we vaccinate our babies. There's no question about this. We are affecting the brains of our children with the amount of vaccines and the timing of these vaccines. And any doctor that says that it's been proven safe, they are either lying or they are in the dark, just like most of us are. And that's where, as a journalist, I worked on the daytime talk show, The Doctors, for 6 years. I celebrated medicine. That's what I've been doing. Then I got into this vaccine story and I left that all behind. I've been doing nothing but investigating the safety of vaccines for 3 years. And we have a serious crisis. Donald Trump set us up with a meeting. I went with Bobby Kennedy and me, and a couple of other people. We got to meet with the heads of the National Institute of Health, CDC, FDA, and air our grievances of how vaccines are being dealt with. And one of the big problems is there is no safety studies being done on childhood vaccines. I want people to hear that. No safety studies. And what I mean is the gold standards of a safety study are the double-blind inert placebo study, where one group gets the vaccine and the other group gets an inert saline injection. This is how every drug we test goes through, and you study them for 5 to 10 years and see and make sure that the placebo group and the drug group are having the same health outcomes, same amount of cancer and everything else. Our vaccines they're not going through that. And we said that to their faces. Are you doing the double-blind experiment? And what they said to us is, no, we are not, because it would be unethical. Get this, unethical to use the scientific method to prove safety in vaccines, meaning they have a religious belief that vaccines are safe before they even get a brand new one. Consider Gardasil, HPV vaccines, one of our newest vaccines. They never tested it for safety because they didn't want to have a placebo group that didn't get it.
And if let's say that you're just a parent, okay, and you're at home and you wanted to quote unquote self-medicate your child, if you gave them the same ingredients in these vaccines, that would be considered child abuse, okay? You would be arrested and lose your kids for child abuse. Oh, but because the loving government does it with Big Pharma and Merck and the doctor, oh, it's loving. Dale Bigtree is my guest here on The War Room, at Dale Bigtree on Twitter, ICanDecide.com. He is on the High Wire. That is the name of his podcast. You can find him there as well if you want to go directly to the source of all this information. You know, it's just incredible when you look at all the ways that the vaccine industry is able to avoid justice, Del. I mean, I don't even think most people realize that the vaccine industry has its own court system. I mean, what? I mean, that is unheard of. If that's not obstruction of justice, I don't know what is.
You're absolutely right. I mean, what people don't know is that you cannot sue a vaccine maker. You can sue a drug maker, but you can't sue a vaccine maker. You can't sue a doctor that gives a vaccine. You can't sue a hospital or even a Walgreens or a Walmart that gives you a vaccine. They're all protected by a law that was passed in 1986 called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. Essentially, the pharmaceutical industry had so many lawsuits at that time from the DPT vaccine, diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, that they blackmailed our government and said, we're going to stop making all vaccines unless you protect us from liability. That's exactly what Ronald Reagan ended up doing by signing that bill. And I think he was reticent. He didn't want to do it. He felt like it was a bad idea, but there was so much pressure. And so now we can't sue the vaccine maker. Instead, you sue the United States government. To be specific, you have to sue Health and Human Services. And so now you're fighting a government agency that used Department of Justice lawyers against you, and you're the one that has to find the science to prove that the injury to your child happened from the vaccine. And think of the irony of this. Who was supposed to have done the science you're supposed to provide in your case? Health and Human Services. I equate it to, it's like being in a murder trial where the murderer is the one doing all of the forensics. You have got to get the people you're suing to hand over the science that shows that you've actually been injured or it's possible to be injured by that vaccine. It's as corrupt a system as it gets. And just so you know, I mean, when people think, well, how many injuries are there? How big a deal is this? In 2016, we have one system that reports injuries from vaccines called VAERS. That's the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. Now, in 2016 alone in America, we had 43,711 reported vaccine injuries. 432 of those were deaths from vaccines. But it gets even worse. Health and Human Services that monitors that system has done their own internal reports and come out and said, you can't trust VAERS. Why? Because we believe that less than 1% of people and doctors are reporting to this system. So think about that. That means that if there was 43,000 injuries, that immediately becomes 43,000, turns into 4.3 million cases. And you know, the deaths, 432 deaths is 43,000 deaths. If we're to take Health and Human Services for their word in that year alone, in 2016, this is a crisis, and it's being covered up mostly by government agencies that are sticking their head in the sand and a pharmaceutical industry that has no liability. People are a part of a giant human experiment. I have proof. I was just at the CDC a month ago, watching when they were approving new vaccines. They've just approved a new hepatitis B vaccine for adults called Hepislav. You want to keep your eye out for this one, folks, because in the trials, 14 people died of heart attacks. They know they died of heart attacks, and the FDA fought back twice. This vaccine came before the FDA 2 times. It was sent back. And the third time, the pharmaceutical industry adjusted the numbers and said, we don't think the heart attacks could really be blamed exactly on the vaccines. They approved it, and so did the CDC. And so now when you go to your doctor's going to say, I got this great new hepatitis B vaccine you should try. And the beauty of this one is you only need 2 instead of the 3 shots in the original. This doctor's going to have no idea that 14 people had heart attacks. And in the CDC meeting, they're all saying, let's make sure we are aware and we watch the monitoring of the people that get this vaccine to see if there are more heart attacks and how many there are. So essentially, because they think it's unethical to test a vaccine beforehand, you're about to be the study, and we're going to see how many people this vaccine kills, and no one will know that they're taking a vaccine that killed people in the trials. That's what's going on in the United States of America between pharma and our government.
There's so many places I want to go with you here, and you're hitting all these points. For example, in no other court of justice, in no other court of law in the United States, does the burden of proof not fall on the state. If you have any other court case in this country, the burden of proof is always on the state, magically not when it comes to vaccines. Again, this is because they have a separate court system. It's a rigged court system. And, you know, maybe we wouldn't be so upset with all the poisons they're putting in the vaccines if they didn't force us to take them. I mean, that's the key here. They force you to take untested vaccines. They force you to do it.
That's right.
And then it's even more sick, because here's what they'll do on the back end. They'll say, "Oh, well, if you want to send your kid to the school, you have to get them vaccinated. Don't you know? We can't put your kid in the school system unvaccinated." So now they've created the structure where they have the vaccine courts, so they're above the law. They force you to take the vaccine at birth. They scare you into doing it. A Hep B vaccine after a Hep B? Yep. Why in the heck are children getting a Hep B vaccine? And then the third angle is, oh, yeah, well, you can't send your kid to school unless you give them the vaccine. So now the parents just sitting here like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? I have to send them the vaccine. And people need to understand, again, the science. When you're a young child, your blood-brain barrier is not fully formed. And actually, you are probably well aware of this. The female blood-brain barrier is formed a lot quicker and stronger than the male blood-brain formula. So you'll see the numbers of children with autism are way higher for young boys than it is for women. Why is that? Because the blood-brain barrier.
4 times the amount of boys.
So this is the science that we know. Boys. And they don't even want to report it. And they want to act like you're crazy for even pointing out facts.
It's absolutely right. This is the one discussion. I mean, look, we can talk about Monsanto's, herbicides and glyphosate. We can talk about global warming. We can talk about all of these, really all other conspiracies. You can talk about chemtrails even if you want, but you cannot talk about vaccines in the United States of America. They won't even go into trying to joke about it. They absolutely shut this down. Our film Vaxxed is the only film that's been kicked out of the Tribeca Film Festival. It's been censored around the world. It still was an explosive hit, probably because of the pushback. But there's nothing like this story in the world. They want everybody to be indentured customers that are forced by the government to be injected with these products. And these products are dangerous. I mean, I wanted to point out, because we only have a little bit of time, when people say, but we've been taking vaccines for centuries and we're healthier and they saved us and they're why we're alive. That's actually ridiculous. You have to understand why did we survive from cavemanhood until now, or however you want to look at the world. We only had vaccines for the last 200 years. We didn't die in Egypt. We didn't die in the biblical times. We're still here. But what I want to point out is I wouldn't be here, Owen, as a medical journalist, if we had the healthiest kids in the country and the healthiest kids in the world. But the opposite is true. We have gone from 12.8% of our children having a neurological or autoimmune disorder in the 1980s when they got 10 vaccines to now 54% of America's children have a chronic illness, either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease, and we're giving 53 vaccines in 72 doses.
Well, I think
these
for me,
two lines go directly with each other.
That for me was actually when I realized what was going on, where people will take the graphs and have it by date, and it's a graph that says, okay, this is the number of vaccines we've given to our kids, and then you put that next to the graph of the kids that have been diagnosed with autism. It's the same graph. And you're just like, oh, wow, duh. Now I know where this is all coming from. All right, my guest here, final segment with Del Bigtree. He really is a hero when it comes to vaccine truth. I mean, ICanDecide.com, a lot of information is there. Of course, the documentary Vaxxed, he was a part of that as well. Just a powerful documentary. And he is on the podcast, The High Wire, with Del Bigtree. I want to get into your brain, though, Del, here. What do you know, or what do you think President Trump knows about this stuff? I mean, he's hinted about it in the past. He obviously... I know he reached out to at least Bobby Kennedy. You guys had an important meeting. There's other things in the works as well. But what do you think is in the president's head when it comes to the vaccine issue? Is this something that he thinks about a lot? Is this something he thinks is a big deal? Or is this something that's not really a priority for him?
Discussed a lot of things. Bobby's the only one that met directly with Donald Trump. I think my feeling is that it appears to me that Donald Trump had something affect someone very close to him. He talks about autism. He did all through the campaign that he has seen vaccines cause autism with his own eyes. How close to him personally, I don't know what that is. But that's, I think, the depth of where he's at. He's a very busy man. He did a lot early on to try and set up Bobby Kennedy. As I said, we had this meeting. There's a lot of people that would like to see him do more, but clearly there's a lot of chaos around the White House. There's a lot of intensity. I'd like to see, him reach out and do some more and work with us more. But I will say this, and I'm saying this prior to this issue. I always say I was from Boulder, Colorado. I was a progressive liberal. This entire journey and investigation of the last 3 years has left me politically marooned at the moment. But I will say this with honesty. Hillary Clinton was going to push the forced vaccines for all. It was called Healthy People 2020. It's on Health and Human Services website. I'm not making it up. The goal was to force vaccinate all adults in America. And what I can tell you is that at the very least, President Trump has given us a stay of execution from that legislation. I do not believe he will ever push a mandated vaccine program like that. He's even gone a step further to give us a freedom of religious and conscience wing to the health department, which he just added and signed into law this year. We're hoping that that's going to apply to vaccines, not just to drugs and things, but that your religious beliefs and your personal beliefs should be held at the highest level, which our First Amendment gives us. So Trump has done that for us too. So I think that's a huge step. We're hoping to work with him more. But right now, I'm telling you, the next liberal president you get, and I believe the Democratic Party, as I used to be a part of it, I'm ashamed to say so, I believe a pillar of that party now is based on a belief in vaccines. And every single Democrat that even waffles now on whether they're going to force vaccines, you see them get taken out. We saw this happen with a district attorney in San Antonio, a guy named Nico LaHood, who came forward and said that his child had gotten a vaccine and got autism from it. He was a district attorney. Well, millions of dollars came in this year against him to his opponent, both Democrats, and they took him out for simply speaking and saying the honest truth. His child was injured by a vaccine. So these are issues that are very forefront now in our elections. And I want to give a shout out, by the way. We're not on our own. In Oklahoma, they just won. Here in California, we have a guy named Senator Richard Pan that passed a law forced vaccinating all of our kids to go to school called SB 277. In Oklahoma, they had the same thing with a guy named Irvin Yen. And just last week, Oklahomans for Vaccine Health, Freedom got their own candidate and ran it against Irvin Yen and beat him out for having tried to run a law force vaccinating Oklahomans. So this is an issue people are starting to stand up and make a difference. This is going to be a platform issue in our future if we don't want to see our children's brains being destroyed by forced vaccinations for an industry that's there to just make billions of dollars off of us. So it's a huge, huge issue.
And again, the science is there. There's a reason why they test the brain cells and they see the increased aluminum, because it's an adjuvant in the vaccine, which why? I mean, why even put aluminum in there? Why even put mercury in there? Again, you have to, it's like, what? Like, it doesn't even make sense, but they don't even tell you this stuff. And so it kind of sounds to me like you respect the fact that Trump hit this at least, but now obviously he's got 100 other battles. Maybe he'll double back around and come back to it, but that's where it's at there. And then as far as, the Democrat Party getting behind the forced vaccinations, I think that I've seen this firsthand. I actually have family members that make vaccines. So I know there is a kind of a religious cultish aspect to the vaccine. I mean, honestly, it's like a cult, really. These people just vaccine. But it's all about control, though. But it's about control more than anything.
I don't know if it's about control or not, but you're right about it being a cult. I mean, think about this. I stood at a class at NYU and I said, is there a company or a nonprofit that could do so much good, feed the poor all over the world, put in your, sanitation in Africa, would do so much good? Only one issue, they have to sacrifice an innocent child once a year. Raise your hand if you would join that group. Of course, none of the kids raised their hand. But then I pointed out, if I talk to any doctor or scientist in the country and say, there are allergic reactions to vaccines at the very least. We know children are being killed every year by vaccines. How do you accept that as a doctor? And they will say to me, that is the accepted casualty to achieve herd immunity, this mythological idea that by vaccinating everybody And yes, some will die, but that's the accepted casualty. Right there, they've just become one of the most dangerous cults the world has ever seen. Because as I pointed out, it looks like in 2016, there could have been 43,000 murders by vaccines in America alone. This cult is out of control, and it now has our government in the lurch. And there's 270 more vaccines that are now in the verge of approval or have been approved, and thousands more in the trials in the pipeline coming our way. This is the future of the pharmaceutical industry. Make no mistake. They want to be injecting you with their crap, every single year of your life. And do you think you can survive it? Our kids are not. We are now, with autism, gone from 1 in 10,000 in the 1970s to now just about a couple of weeks ago, we are at 1 in 59. And many states that have mandatory reporting, like New Jersey, are showing 1 in 32. So it looks like we're at 1 in 32 children being diagnosed with autism. And since it's worse, as you point out, for boys, 1 out of 18 boys in America now is being diagnosed with autism, a neurological debilitating disease. Many of them will be in diapers as adults. And who's going to pay for those millions and millions of autistic adults in my kids' future? That's the world they're going to live in, and that's being caused by pharma and these mandating laws. Somebody's got to wake up and do something. We got to join groups like Oklahomans for Vaccine and Health Freedom. Wherever you are, everyone thinks their issue is the most important, and I know I might sound like that, but I can't think of a more important issue. If we lose control of our bodies, then what else do we fight for freedom for? What does the 4th of July mean? What did our founding fathers dream? That we're going to be force injected with poisons by the state? I mean, Thomas Jefferson's got to be rolling over in his grave.
But see, you just hit it on the head. They know that, let's say you vaccinate 100,000 kids. They know that 4 of those kids are probably going to keel over and die. Like you said,
Yep.
They just think that that's just what we have to do. This just hit me. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this. It's all crazy. I don't know where this all comes from, but this is like, this is like satanic child sacrifice. I mean, again, I'm not sure who's pushing this. I'm not sure if the Satanists are behind it, but I mean, you boil this down. This is child sacrifice. This is human sacrifice that the government is now behind. I mean, the next documentary, I guess, Dale, would be you take an example of children that were vaccinated, and then you compare to the children that were unvaccinated. I mean, you hate to subject children to such a documentary, but I guess that's the one that needs to be done next, Dale.
That's the study we want the CDC to do. You think vaccines are so great? Prove it. Compare vaccinated kids to unvaccinated kids, and let's see who's healthier. They refuse to do that study. That should say it all to everybody. Do not vaccinate your kids. Read the labels, at least not until you read the labels and you start looking at the science all over the world. Thanks for having me on.
And let's see if any of these vaccine makers would hold a day in a regular court of law. They wouldn't. Dale Bigtree, thank you so much.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Extendowise, the latest product from InfoWarsLife.com, fuses all the known compounds that have been proven to be good for our hearts and cardiovascular system. And listen, everybody's got a heart. Well, actually, maybe Hillary and George Soros don't, but everybody else has a heart, and this product is amazing. So, if you have a heart and you want the very best product out there that's designed to aid a healthy heart and cardiovascular system, it's Extendowise, available at InfoWarsLife.com. And like all of our products are game changers, this baby is the most souped up, awesome version the top formulators could come up with and still be affordable. It's one of the very best heart pills out there. It's Extendowise. So get some for yourself and family and friends. It's got the very best fish oil from the fjords. It's very, very pure, very, very clean, and has the EPA type that is specifically good for the heart, cardiovascular system. It's got the properly formulated type of CoQ10 and more. It is Extendowise, now available at InfoWarsLife.com.